Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public. And we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Monday. It's December the 23rd. It is the week of Christmas, so a Merry Christmas to all of you who will be celebrating Christmas, and Merry Christmas to all of you who will not be celebrating Christmas. I'm sorry to hear about that, too. We're getting started here. It's always kind of weird coming out of a weekend, particularly one where we were threatened with a government shutdown, and it didn't happen. What happened to the government shutdown? I thought we were going to get it. I really did. That was going to be my Christmas present, was that the FBI and all of the animals that exist out there that are supposed to take a little break and remember who they work for, they didn't get that. That's because Mike Johnson did the thing that he wanted to do, which means that he placated Democrats. We're going to also cover down on a bunch of other really wild stuff. The first story we're going to cover today is something that is not on any of the mainstream sites. I went looking for it, and it is buried deep in it. U.S. military conflicts. And it's kind of a microcosm for the way that the media has covered up for the Biden's administration and the failures that they've had, which kind of started right away in the disastrous withdrawal of Afghanistan. We're going to get into all that and more. I've got all kinds of stuff to cover down on because it's just been one of those kind of weeks, I suppose. Let's get into it. Before we do, let's say thanks to our friends over at the Wellness Company. Folks, Anish Kumar Jha, a former Biden administration official that handled COVID-19 response, recently gave a chilling speech at the University of Michigan at their School of Public Health. He warned of a new age of pandemics fueled by bioweapon development and natural threats. He called for a massive investment in vaccines. We're going to talk about that later today. And against pathogens that don't even exist yet. He urged war against the so-called misinformation. You guys know we have a problem with that here. The question we need to ask is, who's working on these bioweapons? How many laboratories are there globally? And yeah, just because Trump got the win, it doesn't mean that evil is not lurking in the background. You need to be prepared with your best defense, and the Wellness Company's Contagion Emergency Kit, engineered by Dr. Peter McCullough, a voice of truth, and his medical board, have included 5 critical life-saving medications, which include things like ivermectin, Tamiflu, a nebulizer, hydroxychloroquine. Every household can now have access to hard-to-get medications without the red tape, without having to try to convince your doctor that you need it. It's simple. You fill out a digital intake form. Your kit will arrive in 1 to 2 weeks. Do not wait until the deep state puts their plans into action. You can stay ready for the unexpected. You can prepare instead of repair, and you can head over to twc.health/Kyle. twc.health/Kyle. Use the promo code KYLE. Save yourself up to $32, plus you'll get free shipping, and you can get a digital code if you guys want to do a gift certificate. That's an option as well, something you can still do in time for the holidays if that's where you're at. You guys ready to get into it? Let's do this. All right, sometimes our chat is a really good way to kind of gauge what is out there. How many of you, and I'm going to put the chat up here on the screen, so if you're listening, just imagine that there is a chat that is rolling by, all of our friends over on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Chat folks, how many of you knew that the United States Navy shot down our own jets? And then the next question is, how many of you actually believe that that's what happened? Because when the media gets its ducks in a row and it kind of lines up everybody at the same time, it does make you wonder, doesn't it? Are they doing a cover-up? Of course, a couple of you do. We have a very informed audience, for those of you who do not know. If you're sitting out here listening to this, consider yourself under the very informed category. This is what I want to show you. This is ABC News. And the reason why we're going to look at ABC News' homepage is one of the things I visit every single morning. The reason we're going to do ABC News' homepage is because they were the only ones that I could find it on the main page. And it took this. This is page number 1. So what we call below the fold means you have to scroll past the entirety of the opening page. And there it is. Okay. No mention whatsoever of what I would say is a very critical event. A pilot having to eject, actually 2 pilots. And we lost about somewhere between $55 million and $66 million aircraft to apparently friendly fire. Not a malfunction, but an actual human being screw up. Here's page number 2. They're covering down on trending videos, like holiday things. There's a sit down with John Fetterman wearing a hoodie, which is also very unsettling because he has bare legs. Apparently, he's still wearing shorts. I always wonder, there's some comedy routines that talk about who are the guys that wear jackets on the top, but they wear shorts on the bottom, like women find that to be interesting. John Fetterman is that guy. Okay, so that's screen number 2, full scroll down, nothing yet, including stuff that we covered last week. LGBTQ people having a tough time at the holidays. So this is not even new stories. These are old stories under politics. And then we get to the 3rd page under the fold. And if you can't read it, I circled it for you. I highlighted it for you because that's how small it is. They've got stories from Hakeem Jeffries. They've got things trying to bash on Elon Musk, which is going to be kind of the main focus, or at least towards the end of the show, we're going to hit on how the left is so scared of Elon Musk. They are trying everything they can to just pound a wedge between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And the weirdest sort of comparison, which you probably saw on our thumbnail, they're comparing him to, hold on, Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh, who was a professional communicator, although he wasn't my preferred radio guy. I didn't actually enjoy listening to Rush's show until right at the end for some reason. I actually didn't mind it towards the end. But early on, I didn't have any instinct to listen to him. And then they think they're going to compare him to Elon Musk, who is like basically on the autism spectrum. I think he has a light case of Asperger's, and he's certainly not the most talented communicator. He's interesting because you never know what he's going to say next because he's socially awkward. But what a weird comparison. And they're essentially trying to say that he is the new boogeyman that the left is going to freak out about. But there it is, buried on this page, all the way 3 deep. Why? Why are we not talking about this? I had to go into this story to find out a little bit more, and I'm going to share it with you. The military is doing a full investigation, so I expect to hear everything in real time. That means in a couple years, we'll find out something. 2 Navy pilots were shot down over the Red Sea in a friendly fire incident, so saith the military. They have a full investigation because the F-18, the FA-18, apparently had 2 shot down by the USS Gettysburg. It's a guided missile cruiser. It's part of the USS Harry Truman Carrier Strike Group. And they supposedly fired on their own aircrafts, which were returning back after doing some kinetic actions in the Yemen area. Now, what's interesting is that the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen claimed credit for this. They actually stated in some social media posts, there are some articles saying it, that they, in fact, were victorious against the, horrible United States government, and they were able to shoot down some of our aircraft. That would be kind of a game changer for folks that are flying these types of missions, thinking that there is a capability in what is otherwise kind of like rabble out there. And I also put something on the screen here that I wanted you to see because this is what CBS thought was the most interesting thing in the air. Drone collides and falls into crowd at holiday show in Florida, which is a big deal. You don't want things falling out of the sky. But it turns out when a $55 to $66 million aircraft falls out of the sky, I'm a little bit more worried because we're supposed to have unbelievable air superiority. I found this on Twitter, which is something I usually go to when I want to find out who's got some knowledge in this space that is not getting normal media read. And I'm going to share it with you. This is unvalidated, but it sounds accurate based on what I know about IFF, what I know about air traffic control, and what I know about the United States military's parameters for not doing this because we don't see this happen very often. This guy goes by a handle at Catholic Squid. You can see why I'd find that kind of charming and interesting. And the Catholic Squid, a guy named Jeff, the middle finger of honesty, another sort of a tip of the hat, the stuff we like here at the Kyle Seraphin Show. He claims this: I was a missile systems supervisor. I was on the same class of boat with the same radar platform that shot the same missiles. And simply put, his old job, he shot down airplanes and missiles. Number one, The FA-18 was squawking coded IFF. That's identify friend foe. That is the way that you see who's on your team and who is not when you're looking out into the information space, looking over a battlefield. Number 2, all units are linked real time by a system that's called, and then he has a funny little face, Link, which is kind of funny. Sometimes you find out that the military uses these like really goofy names. Apparently the system is called Link in the same way that the system that captures drones when they lose contact with the pilots. A lot of times the pilots are based in, let's say, like Nevada, and they're operating over airspace in Afghanistan, or they're flying over Iraq, or they're flying over Yemen. And if they lose contact with them, if the comms go down, the system that brings them back in is called Skynet, which is sort of terrifying if you're a Terminator fan. Number 3, he says any engagement has multiple steps or queries that communicate back and forth with the aircraft. And number 4, all units are briefed on ongoing operations, including flight paths, which is to say that you would know if these things are flying in the space that they're supposed to be. So when you look into the information space over the aircrafts or over the battlefield, and you see flights that are flying, the places they're supposed to be flying that are supposed to be friendlies, you should have a whole lot more questions before you loose some missiles and put down a $55 to $66 million aircraft. All of this indicates to me, especially the part where the media is not talking about it, that we have not gotten the full story and that friendly fire may not be the case. But you have to figure out this. What would be better for the American government to say? We blew it, which is a really, really terrible thing. We shot down and almost killed some of our own pilots. We put them in fatal danger in a friendly fire accident? Or is it easier to say the Iranian-backed rebels in Yemen, the Houthi group that has been taking over, ships and kind of like running out there with speedboats, that they are now more capable than we ever expected, and that they have advanced to the point where they are shooting down what should be an air superiority situation? They're both really bad. Imagine being in the Biden administration and having to eat one of those kind of shit sandwiches. I don't know any other way to say it. You have to either try to go out there and convince them that you're woefully incompetent, that your commander, who they're going to have to destroy because of this, because it was a friendly fire, or they hope that they can wait long enough to be able to bury it. The only thing that's actually going to save this commander, if he was not the one who did it, is going to be Donald Trump coming in and seeing a change in regime where maybe some transparency comes out and they can at least hold this guy blameless and say, no, we got overrun because we let our foot off the gas and we didn't keep our military doing the thing the military is supposed to do. We failed to keep ahead of an Iranian threat. And so an Iranian proxy was actually able to shoot our planes out of the sky. It's all bad news all around the horn. So hopefully we can experience a little bit of transparency in the future. I think Americans hope. I think that's what even people that were in the independent middle that don't love a Donald Trump, maybe that's what they thought too. In addition to the media kind of playing this game, they've also been playing this little kind of this little kick around talking about the would-be shutdown. That didn't happen. The shutdown didn't happen. I thought the most interesting thing that came out of it was sort of this quasi-threat. And maybe it explains a little bit more about why it looks like Speaker Johnson walked away from the table losing. Maybe this was also on the plan. And in which case, there's always more going on behind the scenes that we can hear. I want you to listen to Karine Jean-Pierre. She's the White House press secretary. She is our favorite sideshow Bob in sort of DEI feminine form. They're talking about the shutdown. This is before they actually took the vote. So this is before this press corps had that information. And they wanted to know, will there be a transition of government if the government is not funded? It's actually not a bad question, and we don't usually see that. It seems like it was almost like a coded threat that came out there, and then we'll play Hakeem Jeffries, who seems thrilled, by the way, that he got everything he wanted.
Since you mentioned the shutdown, different angle on that question, sure. Potential shutdown, I should say. Yeah. Should the American people be confident that in the event of a shutdown, there would still be a smooth transition and inauguration process?
That has been the president's commitment. And that you've heard directly from him. We want to make sure that there is a responsible committed to a responsible transition, and as you know, his team, he and his team has certainly been working towards that. The team has been preparing for months to make sure that happens. I will say, though, if there is a shutdown, and I don't want to get too much into hypotheticals, but this is the reality, transition activities will be restricted. and with limited exceptions, obviously, but such as prevent imminent threats to the safety of human life or the protection of property. Those are the things that we would that we would have to be concerned about. And so we're doing everything to ensure a smooth transition, but the choice to allow a transition to move forward is in the hands of Republicans in Congress.
Oh, how empowering. The choice to decide whether or not we are going to allow a transition to move forward is in the House Republicans' hands. All right. So that seemed to me like a little bit of a veiled threat. Now, obviously, if you don't fund certain parts of the government, then certain parts of the government are not going to come to work. But I think KJP knows, just like I do, just like anybody who works in the federal government knows, that there are two different types of jobs. The non-essential ones, which we don't really know why they exist, but they do, and the essential ones. And those people have to come to work either way, or they lose their job. And those include things like the security apparatus, the ones that are warding off imminent threats, that are doing the analysis and the research and potentially the interdiction on such things. You know, members of the military, members of law enforcement, folks that have to secure the Capitol, people that have to do all the jobs that you would expect that'd be necessary to be able to roll out. But you might not have some of the event planners, and you may not have some of the people that want to go and do the celebratory stuff. They're still going to hire and pay the local law enforcement in Washington, D.C. to go out there and block the streets. I'm sure of that. Just an interesting kind of little taste. I just want you guys to see it. Anyway, that may be why Hakeem Jeffries was so excited. It's a very short little clip. But notice all three people on the screen here. They seem beaming like they just got everything. It's being framed as a win. Mike Johnson is framing it as a win. But it's caused a schism within people who generally identify as conservative and those people who are sort of like Republican/MAGA at all costs. You don't want to start off with a loss. But the problem is that we actually are then accepting the framing that the media has done, which is to say that House Republicans actually were the ones who had this in their hands in the beginning. This is still the Biden administration. Everything from shooting down our own planes or losing superiority, all of this kind of stuff, it all should fall under who the president is, who we've been told is completely incapacitated. And that's why he couldn't run again. And that's why Kamala Harris was the right answer. And how interesting. Because as an incapacitated guy, he's doing some really interesting political movement. We're going to talk about commutations of life sentences in just 1 second. Because, listen, everybody wants to be the most pro-life president in history. Donald Trump claimed it first. Joe Biden, a practicing Catholic, a good person by his own standards. He had to say the same thing. We'll get there in just 1 sec. Here's Hakeem Jeffries, again, sounding like he won. I tend to take him at his word. That smile doesn't look like he's acting. I don't think any of these people are particularly good actors.
Good evening, everyone. House Democrats have successfully funded the government at levels requested by President Biden in order to meet the needs of the American people in terms of their health, safety, and economic well-being.
And there you have it. They got what they wanted. They win. That seems to me like a media win. Again, the media acting as the arm of the Biden administration, pushing it out there. I'm going to give you another example, which is very strange. And this is one that I was tracking as of last week, and then I found even a new kind of angle on it. I didn't realize that this was an attempt to get an angle, but once you start seeing how the stories start framing up, you go, oh, okay, here's what the op looks like. The story is Liz Cheney is the House GOP's first sacrifice in the Donald Trump revenge campaign. Now, that comes from MSNBC. That's our folks on the hard left. It says in an interim report, House Republicans suggested that the FBI should investigate former Congresswoman for her role in the January 6th committee. No surprise to learn Tuesday that House Republicans are investigating the previous investigation of January 6th. The reason why they're doing that, by the way, is because it was a lie, that they omitted information, they deleted information, which was supposed to be retained. They didn't do a fair and honest thing, and people changed their testimony, apparently after meeting with people like Liz Cheney, which seems very suspect. So the question is, did she violate law? Did she violate the parameters of her bar license? And so on and so forth. They said we shouldn't dismiss House Republicans' decision to suggest that Cheney could be investigated as just another round of cultish behavior. It's not cultish behavior. It's actually posturing to show a showcase of loyalty, and they want to make a point of attacking her. So this is kind of like setting up. Imagine a future. If you were to go back to 2020 and say in 2024, as Donald Trump is reelected and Joe Biden is walking off his lame duck session in the last 4 years, they're going to see Democrats, and not just Democrats, but the hard left Democrats over at MSNBC defending Liz Cheney, who voted with Donald Trump almost 100% of the time. Because in the final days of the Trump administration, she thought to save her own skin, and she sided with the House Democrats and the Nancy Pelosi types, and she went out there and did this sort of like sham show trial where they investigated things that happened January 6th of 2021, and they pushed forward this wild narrative. And now she's in the crosshairs. I wasn't seeing the angle until I see this. They want to present it as a possibility. This could happen. It would be revenge. And then you've got the sane voices over at Newsweek, which is regularly used to seed information coming from the DOJ, coming from sort of the deep state actors, trying to push forward what they really want to see. Sometimes they're giving a warning. You remember Newsweek was the one that broke the story talking about the 266 Oscar delineation, an FBI codification showing that people were considered agave, anti-government, anti-authority, violent extremists. That's you and me. Those are those of us that think that the federal government should stay out of our business. So sometimes they use this sort of outlet to push forward what they really want, not the scare tactic. And it takes both pushes to be able to make it work. Donald Trump wants to pardon Liz Cheney. I'm going to read it again. It's on the screen, but just in case, Donald Trump wants to pardon Liz Cheney. This is an opinion piece. And I thought, well, who is this guy? Do they just have a voice of sanity as a guest writer? His name is Ross Rosenfield. I went and looked at his, I'm just going to read you some of the articles that he's written recently, so you're not going to be on the screen here. He wants to, Trump wants to pardon Liz Cheney. Biden's biggest mistake was not arresting Trump. Democrats should become liberals again and learn how to fight. I don't know. How do you solve a problem like Donald Trump in a debate? His opinion, we should condemn violence and also Trumpism right after the assassination, and expand the Supreme Court now are his July, September, November, and December offerings in Newsweek. So that sounds pretty leftist, especially stuff like expand the Supreme Court. We have to, condone or condemn Trumpism, all that kind of thing. So here's what it says. Following a rather suspect report, Georgia GOP Representative Barry Loudermilk suggested that former Representative Liz Cheney could be prosecuted for for her poor investigation of the January 6th attack. And Donald Trump said that she could be in a lot of trouble on True Social. This is where Trump goes and puts his outlet. He has his little take on it. While it might seem that Trump is eager to see Cheney and others prosecuted for their work on January 6th, appearances can be deceiving because in reality, Trump is likely to have another goal in mind. He wants Cheney pardoned. I assume that they're acting like he's trying to get a preemptive pardon from Joe Biden. And the reason supposedly is counterintuitive, but it makes sense because it's Donald Trump. And so therefore he doesn't make any sense. He's acting like an aggrieved martyr when in truth, he doesn't want to relitigate January 6th. This is the point of the article that they're saying. The entire push is to say, can we get Liz Cheney pardoned? And that's actually what Donald Trump wants. So that if she is pardoned by Joe Biden, it's framed as a win. Got it? Every one of these little ops, it's not one dimensional. It's not like I say this and I hope that you'll do this. It's layer upon layer. The way my buddy George likes to describe operations, particularly information operations, is that some information starts moving the current clockwise. And then some other information introduced to other people, and that's moving counterclockwise. When we break down the anatomy of an op, it's constantly moving, and there are swirls that are going in opposite directions at all times as you get further and further away from the main source of what they want. And the goal is to radicalize certain people to do certain things and other people to do other things. It's tiring. It's nauseating. It's almost impossible to explain unless you were sitting there and looking from the outside saying, these are the pictures that we are going to run. We are going to choreograph the following people to dance like this. And it does get done. And some of the best in the world at it are the Israelis, the Mossad. Actually, U.S. intelligence does a pretty good job. We just have a disorganization because we don't have one single fundamental principle, which is that at any moment we could be wiped off the map, and therefore everything is on the table. The United States government has a lot more competing interests. I do want to play this little 60 Minutes piece here about a guy being interviewed about how the op works as a Mossad agent. They're talking about the pager operation, the walkie-talkie, the two-way operation that went on recently, where Mossad / Israel was able to detonate and really precision strike a lot of members of Hezbollah. Once you start seeing it in sort of a big picture, like you are the director, the screenwriter, and the main actor, it starts making a lot more sense. And that's exactly how this guy describes it. You're going to hear a voice modulation. He's sitting there wearing like a balaclava and some sunglasses. It's very theatrical. But it's not a bad explanation for people to grasp. Everyone sort of thinks that the information op is linear. And in fact, it is multiple circular and oftentimes, opposing information ops that are being spun at the same time. Here we go.
How did you convince Hezbollah to buy this?
Well, obviously, they didn't know that they were buying it from Israel.
Who did they buy it from, or think they were buying it from?
We have an incredible array of possibilities of creating foreign companies that have no way being traced back to Israel, shell companies over shell companies who affect the supply chain to our favor. We create a pretend world. We are a global production company. We write the screenplay. We're the directors. We're the producers. We're the main actors. And the world is our stage.
Quite simple. You have to look at it from a much broader perspective. Most of us are too far zoomed in to really grasp that any individual thing might be some part of an op, but it's not the entirety of the op itself. That actually is the Kansas City Shuffle, which I've dedicated entire podcast to, and I encourage you guys to look through our Rumble channel or look through any of the podcasts, whether it be on Apple or on Spotify, whatever. Go look for the Kansas City Shuffle. If you're not familiar with it, let me give it to you in brief form and just encourage you to go back and look. The Kansas City Shuffle is letting people know that they are being conned. There is a confidence game being played, that they are being defrauded. But the shuffle and the real fraud is letting people think that they're being defrauded and that they know what the fraud is when in fact the fraud is something else. If I can get you to believe A, but I'm really trying to accomplish B, allowing you to believe A while I accomplish B is the op. And this happens all the time. Again, we're human beings that are looking for proximate causes. Somebody shoved somebody and that person fell down. This is the way that our mind wants to work. We want to see logical distinctions. The entire intelligence sphere, and the reason why it's so dangerous to work it into law enforcement, is that the proximate cause is almost never the actual reason or the original actor. The original actor is standing far away, and the more removed and insulated they can be, the better off the op will run, because it's hard to see who's doing what. And that's how you end up with Chip Roy. I was thinking of Mike Rogers. Chip Roy is a big problem because he's a big rhino, because he's not conservative, even though him and Thomas Massie and Nancy Mace and Eli Crane, all of these people have continued to basically try to hold the same lines. Andy Biggs is another one. The folks that kind of vote the same way all the time when they feel like they're being conned by a Hakeem Jeffries, by a Nancy Pelosi type, they tend to be pretty consistent. They go, this is not conservative. But it's not what's necessarily good for Republicans, which is a different thing. There's a reason why that distinction is constant, and it is very important to people like me. It might be important to you as well. It's why people feel sort of politically homeless, because Republicans do things that generate value for the big R, the party, the Republican Party. And if you're not one of those people, then you are kind of free to be able to open your mind up and say, what is being done? Who's being manipulated? And how do I get myself out of that manipulation? I was actually a little bit of a victim of it earlier this weekend. I made a comment on, because I just, as a knee-jerk reaction, dislike what Susan Collins has to say. And it got some play on social media. It's sort of an accident. It was a moment where I was in the middle of getting my child ready for church and dressing a toddler and trying to get shoes on my preschooler and getting the things that need to be done. And as that happened, I saw Susan Collins talking about something about Social Security, and I went, no, I don't think that's good. And so I read some short, bad summaries, and I got taken in by it. And of course, then some people lost their minds. This is something that can happen to anyone, including me, who's constantly looking for it. The minute that you get distracted and you can't get detached, I just have a dislike for Susan Collins, because when I see her, I think she's lying. And it turns out it may not be the worst thing in the world, even though it's going to add like $196 billion to the insolvency rate of Social Security. When you get taken in on that kind of stuff, the easiest thing to do is just admit it. You go, oh, okay, I didn't have all the facts. I should have looked into that further. And when someone presents you a thing and it's exactly the opposite, and they are a reasonable voice, saying it in a reasonable way, you say, well, do I know everything? If you are a conservative, if you are someone who's principled, you'd say, well, maybe I don't. I have to go educate myself. And if it's the opposite of that, where you just say, I'm all about team, then you're going to be in the tribal camp and you're going to just double down on being wrong. It happens. We can't be mad about it. Let's go ahead and take a quick little breather. Let's go say thanks to our friends over at Patriot Mobile. They do have our principles in mind. You guys are probably tired and frustrated of a stalling economy. It's the reason why Donald Trump was elected. You're sick of inflation and endless wars, which don't seem any better off. The relentless assault on our values, our principles. Thankfully, there are companies like Patriot Mobile that believe in America and the Constitution, which is the underlying principles. I'm proud to partner with Patriot Mobile because they are on the front lines. They're fighting for the First and the Second Amendment. More on that later. Sanctity of life, also more on that later. And our military and our first responder heroes. It's time to take a stand for conservative causes. Put American first. You can do that by switching to Patriot Mobile today. You'll get the same nationwide coverage as the big providers because Patriot Mobile operates on all three of the major networks. Plus, they back their service with a coverage guarantee. You'll get 100% U.S.-based customer service, which is a big deal. If you don't want to talk to people in India, they'll find you the best plan for your needs. You can keep your phone number, you can keep your phone, or you can upgrade one or both of those. You can go to patriotmobile.com/KSS. Remember, they have a slightly different promo code, KSS, or you can call 972-PATRIOT. Give them the same code. Right now, you're going to get a free month of service if you use that offer code KSS. Don't get fooled by other providers pretending to share your values or acting like they have the same coverage when they don't, and they can't. You can switch to America's only Christian conservative mobile provider. By the way, they put lowercase c for that conservative. It's Patriot Mobile, patriotmobile.com/KSS. Talk about people that don't have our values. Let's talk about more of the op. This is something coming out of ABC. Now, if you guys listen to the American Radicals podcast, you probably already heard this. But this one is an interesting story. Again, how much of this is being allowed? I know for a fact, and there are very few people who can say this definitively, but the people that are whistleblowers came to me as well. There are whistleblowers within the FBI that had prosecutable Chinese counterintelligence cases around the country that were being told no. This is not a priority for the Biden administration. Isn't that interesting? Man pleads guilty to operating secret Chinese police station in New York City. This op, which has been called Operation Skynet, it's been called Operation Fox Hunt. It's got a couple different names where the Chinese have located their intelligence service and their law enforcement capabilities within the United States with the awareness of the U.S. government, particularly the FBI. This goes back to Jim Comey's time. Chris Wray talked about it. How would it be that in 10 years, theoretically, the premier law enforcement agency in the United States is unable to do anything about these unless it's being allowed? That's the sort of read between the lines. The FBI can prioritize it and learn about it and say this is a big issue. And then someone at DOJ says that we're not going to prosecute it. And even worse yet, the members of Congress haven't passed any laws to outlaw what they refer to as audacious activities on U.S. soil. This includes conspiracy to act as an agent of a foreign government. That's sort of the light version of it. The real version of it is kidnapping and grabbing people in what's called an extraordinary rendition. In other words, pulling somebody from inside the United States that this country does not have the legal ability to extradite and shipping them back to China. Sometimes literally hood over like a movie, a kidnap movie, zip tie, grab them onto a private airfield and then fly them out. And once they get outside of U.S. airspace, we have nothing. We can't go after them. Some of them are legally allowed to be here. And then there's all kinds of extortion operations, either meeting in person or doing it over the phone, attempting to scare these people about what might happen to folks that are back home in China, in various places. I've personally met with people while I was doing work for the FBI where they were playing me recorded tapes of folks inside China threatening their family member. Oh, it's a shame. It'd be really bad if something terrible happened to your aunt or your uncle or your mother or your father who still remain here. You absconded from our quote unquote justice system. We want to go ahead and get you back. It's time for you to come back and face the music. And these people in these quote unquote secret police stations, which were not secret at all, because they're well known. They're well known to those operating in the intelligence sphere, and they're well known to people inside the FBI that they exist, and sometimes they find them, and then you just see this sort of figurehead. So what you're seeing on the screen is a court rendition of one man who pled guilty. And if you think that there wasn't a cover story in place, if you think there wasn't an exchange or a deal made with the Chinese government, I think that is very naive. Remember, they got no problem running ops on you, the American people. They don't mind. They'll push it anytime they want. There's this nominal idea that we're really worried about China, but there's no operational end of it. And that kind of gives me that story about, remember the whole thing about the TikTok bill? Donald Trump said it wasn't a big deal. It turns out that American intelligence services are running the same. This is actually one of the more telling exchanges that I found. This is Dan Crenshaw, who's been kind of under fire of late. He's lost a lot of credibility with a lot of people, not just because he's voted poorly, which is one thing, but he's acted like a real dickhead just to a bunch of people. He's gone out on social media. He's using the F word. He's swearing from his congressional account. It doesn't seem very appropriate for someone as a member of Congress. Your job as a congressman is to take shots, and sometimes people don't like your decision. He just doesn't seem to be handling it well. He's cracking under the stress. This little interaction is sort of amazing. One, he dismisses a reporter and just says, you don't have a serious question, as though he's the adjudicator of that. And the second thing is he makes a bold and ridiculous claim that the American intelligence services are not running information ops on the American people, as if we didn't pay attention and see the Twitter files and see that they were actually happening in front of our eyes, that really aggressive reporters went and did the work of reporters and found out the core source of information, that not only was the FBI paying money to places like Twitter, I'm sure they were paying money to places like Meta and Google, Alphabet, take your pick. Crenshaw sort of dismisses, and he also dismisses the 51 spies who lies situation, which is why they covered up the Hunter Biden laptop. If you want to discredit yourself, deny things that people know happened and happened with their own eyes on a national platform when you're a congressperson. He's also a former Navy SEAL commander, and the SEALs, and particularly at the officer level, would have had regular interactions with intelligence types that were working overseas. So he should be able to spot, even with one eye, he should be able to spot what's going on in front of him, unless he has an agenda, a manipulation, and he's one of those circles spinning either clockwise or counterclockwise against it. Some people want to hear what he has to say, but not probably his constituents who thought that he was a Republican. Here's Dan Crenshaw denying some things that seem eminently obvious to most of us. Again, the context is asking about TikTok, government Chinese spyware on your phone.
Access to everything TikTok has, which means data on all Americans. And with data and with access to your app that you're addicted to, you can vastly manipulate an entire population, which the Chinese have done.
Are you worried that our intelligence agencies are doing the same thing domestically?
Am I worried that? I know that they're not.
They're not manipulating Americans? They're not controlling the flow of information?
Yeah. Did you have some evidence otherwise that you'd like to share?
I mean,
okay.
Before the
any serious questions?
So ByteDance were to say.
Congressman, you asked for an example of the U.S. intelligence agencies meddling in our information. What about before the 2020 election, when 50 members came out and said the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation? Does that count?
No, because they were retired.
They were retired, but the FBI had the laptop for over a year.
There's nothing even close to what TikTok did.
Oh, well, there's nothing even close to what TikTok did, so that's good. You see how dismissive that is? Close the door, drive off, don't answer any further questions. This is just a limited situation where we're going to acknowledge some things, but we're not going to talk about that because you're going to break through. It reminds me, once again, I can't help it. It reminds me of that liar, liar moment where Jim Carrey's standing in the courtroom and he screams objection to the judge. The judge says, on what grounds? And he said, because it totally derails my argument. Not any legal basis, not procedural or otherwise. It's just, I can't address what you said because it's going to make me look ridiculous. I saw this as well. Steve Friend talked about this on Twitter earlier today, and it made me interested in what's going on here. And apparently they just want us to forget the past. They want us to not remember the things that have happened. That's the hope. I think that's most of the op, is that Americans have a very short attention span. The news cycle moves very quickly, and that's how you push out stories like this from CBS. They're damming the quote-unquote Iron River. Just look at who the bad guy is in this story. Mexico's legal battle to stop gun trafficking from the U.S. If you're wondering who the battle is against, it's actually probably against you, the American consumer that owns a gun. You're a bad person because you own firearms. This was published yesterday. There's an estimated 200,000 to up to 500,000 firearms smuggled into Mexico every year, and they call it the Iron River. I've been around law enforcement. I've been around guns for, I started buying guns probably 20-something years ago. I've never heard this term. So it sounds like a really good marketing ploy. It also sounds like an information op when you start filing it that way. The Mexican government has filed lawsuits against U.S. courts and a handful of gun stores, one of the largest manufacturers of guns in America. They've gone and pushed all these things down because they want to dam up the Iron River and fix the problems that plague the United States. Interesting. What is this problem? It doesn't seem like a United States problem. What it is the media finding a victim. The victim are the poor people of Mexico who are being victimized by you, the gun owners, who continue to own guns and maybe sell guns and don't have enough government intervention in your gun selling and buying. And if they can just get you to feel bad about it, to help our poor brothers to the south, then maybe Mexico won't have such a problem with cartels. Do you follow the logic? You own guns. That's your fault. You're willing to sell guns without having government background checks. You're not willing to fill out all kinds of paperwork to get your private property to another person in a private party to private party transmission. And because you will not accept all of this government overreach, which some of it is mandated not to exist, some of those guns will be moved by nefarious actors who are breaking laws, breaking not just U.S. laws, but also Mexican laws, and then they will take it down into Mexico, which causes them to have a narco trafficking problem, and a bunch of people get shot with U.S.-based guns. So shame, shame, shame on you. I would go with that. Let's just say, like, by default, I don't want people to get hurt, and I don't want them to get hurt with guns either, right up until the point where I have historical context. In the same way Dan Crenshaw was just faced with 51 spies who lie, don't some of us remember this thing called Operation Fast and Furious? This is a Biden administration dream. If we can just guilt you into giving up your rights, then maybe you will. And the media is going to be all in on it. Here's a really fun little story about the fact that there's only one store that sells guns in all of Mexico, and the rest of them are you, the dirty American gun-owning populace who sells them off to them. So this is a shame piece, but it's done really nicely. I mean, it's done by like a lady with a nice voice and some really good camera angles and a bunch of people that look like they're doing the right thing. Enjoy this. They're going to show you at the end all of the 50 cals. I finally found in this piece, so you got to listen to the end of it. It's about 60 seconds long. The definition of the word weapons of war. We hear that a lot in the gun control argument. I think we've actually found out what they are, and we probably can actually agree on it now.
Like the U.S., Mexico's Constitution grants citizens the right to bear arms. But unlike the U.S., that right comes with a long list of restrictions. There's only one gun store in Mexico, in the middle of a heavily guarded military base in Mexico City. We were allowed in. But before customers can enter, they have to show proof they've passed psychological tests, drug screens, and extensive background checks. The store sells about 1,000 guns a month, mostly shotguns, small caliber rifles, and handguns. What civilians can't buy here are the weapons the cartel favors. Those are not legally sold anywhere in Mexico.
Cartel's favorite weapons are weapons of war, belt feds, 50 caliber rifles, guns that you can shoot from a mile away. The more expensive, the more powerful, the sexier they think they are.
It's a trophy.
It is a trophy.
My favorite is when someone at 60 Minutes feeds the guest, because this is this is a journalistic style. I feed you my soundbite, and then you give it back to me. It's a trophy. It is a trophy. Really? That's journalism. Okay, what's going on there? If you saw at the end, the actual definitions that apparently CBS is going to agree on for weapons of war, which is my absolute favorite, it's 50 cal long rifles, bolt action and semi-automatic. It's belt-fed machine guns. Okay, yeah, those are definitely used in war. They're certainly not the problem like civilian AR-15s are. So there you go. Weapons that are used in war can be called weapons of war. You still have a right to own them, by the way, as an American. It just turns out they don't get to legislate that away, but they'd like to. The guy that they were interviewing was working with another guy named Jonathan Lowry. So he's off screen. There's a written component to this and there's a video component. I want to read you from the written component of the story because it's one of my favorite little quotes. Again, we are going to diffuse and put the blame directly on you. This is how they're going to run the shame op. And then, of course, there's the policy op. Everything has to be done ops inside of ops. Jonathan Lowry says, if you think fentanyl overdoses are a problem, oh, we're like, okay, yeah, we do. If you think migration across the border is a problem, if you think that the spread of organized crime is a problem in the United States, then you should care about stopping the gun crime pipeline to Mexico. That's it. If you think the things that you think, then you should agree with the thing that I say. And he says you need to stop it at its source, no further information given, because all those problems, this is a bold statement, all those problems are driven by the supply of U.S. guns to the cartel. And you know he's a good guy because he's been battling the gun industry in court for 25 years. That makes him a villain to me. That makes him illiberal because owning firearms is a civil liberty in the United States. It's a liberty that we are protecting through our civil litigation process. This guy thinks it's a problem. To me, that makes you illiberal. And like I said, I just can't help but remember these guns, what you're seeing on the screen here, are dozens and dozens of AK pattern and AR pattern weapons that were delivered to members of the cartel under the watchful, not so watchful eye of the United States Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives under the Biden administration in 2009 and 10. And it resulted in the death of federal agents who were American citizens and other Americans because they did a crap job of maintaining any kind of ability to watch them. So were they intentionally arming the cartels, or were they trying to actually run an op and they just sucked at it? Either way, I don't need the government trying to keep track of my guns. They can't even keep track of the guns that they were supposed to keep track of as part of their undercover buy-walk operation that was funding all these cartels. And how many of those guns went there and are still being used? Because guns are durable objects, folks. They don't go away. How many of them stuck around? I would say probably a lot of them. These AKs tend to be around for generations. But of course, it's your problem because you're not going to let the government watch everything you do. So shame on you. Yeah, if you believe that, we got something else to sell you. Actually, let me sell you a Patriot cooler instead. They're way better. They're also a durable good. In fact, my folks came into town and they were looking and they're like, is that your original coolers? It's like, yeah, we still have the tumblers. They still stick around since 2017, since October. PatriotCoolers.com is the website. For now until the end of Boxing Day, the day after Christmas at midnight, you can save 15% on your own Patriot cooler. Go to PatriotCoolers.com or click the link in the show description, which is going to give you the Kyle Seraphin Show collection. If you want the ones that are already pre-engraved, it's Kyle 15. For a short period of time, you can save 15% instead of 10%. It's a really good deal. It's the second best sale of the year since you've already missed Black Friday, and that's a very, very short time. How about that one? Kyle 15, KYLE15, save 15% off them, and you'll get free shipping if you spend $50 or more. So basically just get 2 coolers, one for you, one for someone you love. You can get a 19-ounce coffee mug. It fits nicely in the cup holder. I just got my my truck in finally, and it fits in the cup holder, and I took 2 Patriot coolers. One for the trip up to Dallas, 19 ounces of coffee. One for the trip back down to Austin area, 19 ounces of coffee. That's all I had all day. You guys, it could be your sole source of nutrition if you are such a wild person. PatriotCoolers.com, promo code KYLE15 for a short period of time. Save yourself 15% off. Neither here nor there, but since it was asked in our live chat the other day, I'm still doing this meat diet thing. And some of you guys may have stepped into that space where you want to do like a carnivore diet or an elimination diet for just a small number of things. I'm down like almost 17 pounds, which was not the purpose of it. I actually just wanted to kind of feel better. But I will tell you, if you were thinking about doing this, wait till New Year's. Don't do it over Christmas if you guys have like pies and stuff like that. It'll derail you. It's a not good time to do it. Okay, I want to get deepest into the most fun part of the information op. This is the thing that I've been most excited about. 2 things are getting thrown at us right now. Number 1, this is really special, and we can't help but be excited about it. I found this pop up as one of the lead stories on MSNBC. Musk's power over Republicans has an eerie historical parallel. And I was thinking, oh, they're going to talk about what, like Soros? Are we going to talk about the Koch brothers? No, they're going to talk about Rush Limbaugh. Because Elon Musk, a non-professional communicator who happens to own a large social media platform and communicates sort of semi-autistically, and I don't say that in a mean way, I find him very interesting. He's very funny. He's quirky, and he obviously has a very populist sensibility. But to suggest that he's anything like a guy who sat behind a microphone for hours and hours every single day and broadcast, in many ways, the same show for something like 20 or 30 years, this is a wild take. And all of it is geared up to do one thing and one thing only, to drive a wedge between people who generally are going like, okay, I sort of agree with some of Elon Musk's positions. Like, I don't think most of us agree with his morality. He's been making babies with like a dozen women out there. How many kids did this guy have at this point? A lot. I don't even know. I can't keep track of them. Like, I remember it was like 7 or 9, and he just wants to go out and make babies with any crazy wild lady. A lot of them who are like loony leftists. Some of them have transed as kids and stuff like that, which is why he probably radicalized. They said the specter of voters whipped up into a frenzy by an outsider with a microphone is nothing new to Republican politicians. I guess they've never seen some of the wackos that they've got on their own side. I guess they just have no ability to do introspection. Look, if there was a reasonable comparison here between these two, you got them on the screen, and I guess they kind of look alike if you just do black and white and you ignore the fact that they don't look anything alike. They said his dozens of posts on social media on X have sent a furious pace that have changed the course of the last 12 hours. This was done on December 23rd, so that's this morning they wrote this. He's had a flurry of false claims and threats of electoral retribution against any Republican. People said their phone was ringing off the hook. People who are elected have to now listen to Elon Musk because he's whipping up people into a voter frenzy. I think it's actually a misdiagnosis of what's happening. People are using X. They're using Elon Musk's platform, which he obviously monitors, and they are saying what they think. And there's a groundswell of people saying what they think. And Elon Musk goes like, yeah, that sounds pretty reasonable and pretty sensible. We're talking about something that Donald Trump has called the common sense revolution, where you just have a bunch of regular people that previously were unengaged, previously under the Twitter 1.0 rules, didn't have any possibility of explaining themselves or sharing their opinion without getting canceled or censored. And they're going, hey, my voice actually has some resonation. And by the way, there's a lot of other people that it resonates with. And it turns out it also resonates with the wealthiest man in the history of humanity, who now has the ear of the incoming president-elect. That's terrifying. God forbid that happen. And so Scott Jennings kind of breaks it down as they're trying to do this. Scott Jennings, the continual voice of reason on CNN, he's like the perfect foil over there because he's really nice about how he says it. And he says this in a really nice way, but he just kind of dismisses them. It's really nice if you're in a position where you're kind of seeing the side win that you want to back because you don't have to get emotional about it. And he does that. So this is making more and more compelling television. I think that CNN is now part of the op, obviously, because they're CNN, but they're bringing on not controlled opposition, but tolerable opposition. And in some ways, they might be tacking back towards the middle because that's where the audience actually believes things happen in America. Here's Scott Jennings talking about the whole line of President Musk and trying to drive this wedge and why it's probably not effective because as much as Donald Trump loves watching Fox News, he instinctively looks at what these people says as being malicious, nefarious, and with an ulterior motive.
Is this going to wear thin with Donald Trump soon?
I don't think so. I mean, look, they appear to be getting along well. Musk was very instrumental in his victory. And I hear Democrats, criticizing the idea that we have unelected people with too much influence over the government. I invite them to pick up the Wall Street Journal from this week and find out that unelected people have been running the government for the last 4 years. I hear Democrats criticizing the influence of billionaires on our politics when you've got this Soros punk running around collecting Democrat politicians like my kids collect Pokemon cards. So I think all the criticism of Musk coming from the left is totally hypocritical, totally over the top. And he is doing something interesting, bringing some transparency to the federal government. It's not a terrible thing.
But how do we stop this? Well, you stop it by being honest, which is really hard for them to do. As I mentioned at the start of the show, the first thing that I went looking for was where's the story about the F-18s? Why do we see the media covering for failures, which usually would go right on the president? I guarantee you, if Donald Trump was in office, they'd be like, he screwed up the military, all of his things. His defense secretary is to blame, and so is he, and his policies, and the fact that he's in this place, and the fact that we have conflict over there, it shows weak leadership. Everything would trickle down, and they would pin it on his head because that's what they do. And then you see the media do the opposite thing whenever the Biden administration's in. It took me going to the New York Post to be able to find this story, which some of you may be tracking over the weekend, especially if you live in the Northeast. An illegal Guatemalan migrant, aka illegal alien, who snuck into our country, lit a woman on fire and burned her to death. Probably the biggest fear that I would ever have of dying would be being burned alive, because it looks horrific. And I've dealt with burns, and I've dealt with it as a paramedic as well. He lit a woman on fire by taking a lighter to her clothing. She was passed out, which is not great. New York has problems with homeless people. That's not new, especially all urban areas that have it. You guys know what it looks like. What was hard to find was anyone covering the story, and the ones who did said that there was a person of interest with no information about his background. They didn't talk about how he had no right to be here and killed a homeless person, which theoretically would fall into the ears of the leftist sort of like bleeding hearts, but they don't seem to have it. Again, some of the animals are more equal than others. We always find out. And that's the sad thing about being a Democrat, because it's not about principles. It's also the sad thing about being a Republican, for whatever it's worth. This is why I think being a conservative and independent is sort of superior to all of those. It doesn't mean you don't vote for Republicans, generally speaking, because you don't have a lot of choices. But this is really a truly awful story. And it kind of falls into this sort of disrespect for life that we've seen under the Biden administration. Generally, more broadly, I'm going to bring it in line with what he just did with federal death row inmates. Again, I said Biden was trying to be the most pro-life president, and that's what he's going to claim. He's going to try to claim, he's trying to build some version of a legacy. So he's throwing some scraps over to his friends on the radical left. I understand the reason for the death penalty. I understand arguments against it. If somebody around me was taken by a violent criminal, I would probably want the death penalty. And I also understand that as Christians, we should probably be fighting against it. It's a really difficult place to be if you're a law and order type of person, a person who understands that vengeance should exist, we feel, and then also trying to set ourselves against it because of our religious beliefs. That's a really hard space to be in. Biden seems to walk with impunity through all of them and basically ignores all of it as well. And of course, I'm going to play you a clip at the end of this of showing how easily it is covered up. So this is the story. The story goes from CNN's politics page. Biden commutes the most federal death row inmate sentences, 37 of the 40 people that are on federal death row, just before Donald Trump takes office. And this is his statement. He said, I'm commuting the sentences of 37 to 40 individuals in federal death row sentences. They're going to have life without parole. All right. He says these commutations are consistent with the moratorium my administration has imposed on federal executions. In other words, he didn't allow any executions to happen with his DOJ in cases other than terrorism and hate-motivated mass murder. The majority of the 37 individuals were commuted on Monday. The ones that they left out was the Boston massacre bomber who was involved in that explosive device that was set off, the pressure cooker bombs. So that was one of the Seraphin brothers. Dylan Roof, who shot people in a church, allegedly, I guess, because he was a white supremacist, and he seemed like a real dummy. And then the guy who shot up the Tree of Life synagogue in Pennsylvania. Those are the three that didn't get commuted. Everybody else got commuted. So they'll leave 3 there. And wouldn't it be nice if this guy, who's claimed to be a Catholic, actually believed that it was all about like promoting life, and that even people who are murderers and have been convicted and sentenced to death should be able to live because he's a Catholic, because he's a Christian, because he believes that that it's not man's job to take life. We'd believe that, except 3 of those lives didn't matter as much as the other lives. Those 3 lives he basically holds in the same value as unborn babies because they've done everything they can to push abortion. Again, no principles whatsoever. And that's going to be Biden's legacy. No principles, no answers, no transparency, and a media that basically runs and falls all over themselves to cover it up. This is the perfect microcosm of a Biden story. We've been hearing for years, whether you listen to people like Ryan Matta, whether you listen to other voices out there talking about this, that there have been either tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of children lost by the Biden administration and sold into sexual slavery or trafficking. This is CBS asking Alejandro Mayorkas. He's sort of the classic villain, a deep state, longtime actor inside the federal government, giving the best, we're not accountable and someone else did it and we take some investigations, and just talking around the problem. And the media just goes like, oh yeah, well, that's the answer then. Never a critical look. This is all part of that op that goes on. That's why you have people on the political left now saying this doesn't even happen. Enjoy this.
ICE was also unable to account for more than 32,000 unaccompanied kids who failed to appear in court from 2019 to 2023, according to the report we read. The incoming border czar, Tom Homan, says these children are being exploited and trafficked. Is that true?
Well, Margaret, we certainly have received reports of children being trafficked, even those as to whom we know where they are. That is outside the responsibility of the Department of Homeland Security.
Mm-hmm.
What we do is we turn children over within 72 hours, as the law requires, to the Department of Health and Human Services, and then HHS places those children. Of course, we investigate.
Yeah, of course, we investigate it, but we don't come up with any answers because the government investigates the government, and they found that the government didn't do anything wrong. They did everything according to the book that the government wrote that is ineffective and the reason why the problem exists in the first place. That's probably the easiest summation of how this works. I'll put the whole clip over on Locals if you guys want to go see that. It's KyleSeraphin.com if you want to join our Locals channel and you can be part of that. What we'll do, because I was about to tell you all, we're going to take a couple days off for the birth of our Savior. I'm going to be taking Christmas Eve off, Christmas Day, and Boxing Day, which I just think is funny because I don't know what it is, but it's a holiday in Canada, which we're about to make the 51st state, right? You guys with me? We're going to take over Canada. We're going to take off that. I'll be back on Friday, and we'll bring Steve on to do a Friendly Friday if we can get him in, if we can talk him into it. We're going to take a little time and celebrate the things that are important that hopefully you guys also get a chance to do. We're going to be around family, but I want to open up. I'm going to set up today's episode with all of the links that we normally put over there on Locals, and I'm going to leave the live chat open. So if anybody wants to get in there and gather and have a little discussion, a lot of you guys don't exchange your phone numbers, and I totally understand that. Join our Locals if you guys want to join in the live chat over there, and it'll be going for the next couple days, and we'll get back to you on Friday with the next episode. Again, we're going to try to live out those values that Joe Biden has pretended to live out, which is that we care about children, we care about life, and we're going to go celebrate the life and the birth of our Savior, Jesus Christ. For those of you who celebrate, and for those of you who don't, join a Christmas celebration anyway. It might radicalize you. I'm finding out that we've radicalized some people and made them get baptized, made them show up and join a church, and I'm really happy that you do, because your life will be better. I didn't know that when I was younger. I had the luck of being born into a family that pushed it on me, and then it became a thing that I realized this is why success happens. You orient your compass early on in your life, and then you can always go back and find true north, which is what we've done here. God bless all of you that listen to the program. God bless all of you that are out there that are suffering and having a rough time, because I know there are some of you, and I have some of your stories. I got a little inkling of it. We're in a much better place this year, and a much better place with our family and physically than we were the year before, and certainly better than the year before that, when all of this wild stuff kicked off. And I'm grateful because you guys, the audience, are the reason that we're able to do a lot of the stuff that we do. The reason why I'm able to go walk downstairs in a few minutes and go hang out with my kids is because of you. It's because of this audience, and it's because you continue to support this program. So thank you so much, and a very, very Merry Christmas. I want to play kind of an interesting thing. Oftentimes I lean towards sharing things about the average and everyday man. Got kind of a cowboy piece of wisdom here that I think will be a nice little palate cleanse. It's a little bit kind of a emotional music, but I think it's right. And I think it's true. We all are dealing with struggles, women and men. I think this is actually true about women as well, although they need to support differently. So as we say kind of a goodbye to you for the next couple days, consider that there's someone out there that's carrying a burden. They don't necessarily want you to pick it up. They don't even want you to go solve their problem. They just want you to know that they're carrying the burden. And so I know a lot of you are carrying that burden. And I say Merry Christmas and God bless you. Here's a little parting thought for the day.
The average man, I believe, the average real man, does not need to go get therapy for the battles and the burdens he's carried inside. What he needs is for those that he's carrying them for to recognize that they're there and to respect it and to be grateful for it. They don't need to talk it out to get rid of it. They need the one that they're going through this hell for to recognize it's there and to be grateful that the man is carrying this for them. They don't need therapy, they need gratitude.
We all could use a little bit more of that. Go to church if you guys have not done it, and if you're thinking about it and you're thinking maybe I would, but I don't know how I'll be accepted, watch Home Alone first and then go to church. Everybody's welcome at church. Look forward to seeing you guys there, and we'll see you on Friday. God bless you. Have a great Christmas.
Thanks for listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram @Kyle Seraphin.